You've been lied to about what meditation actually does. The schools, the apps, the wellness industry packaging mindfulness as stress reduction, all of it misses the core function. These techniques were never designed to make you calmer or more productive or better at managing anxiety. The Vijnana Bhairava Tantra contains 112 methods for one purpose, which is shattering the illusion that you are a limited self trapped in flesh, revealing you as the consciousness in which the entire universe appears. If you carry conditioning around spiritual hierarchy, if you believe enlightenment requires decades of monastic discipline, if you assume ancient texts speak in metaphor rather than mechanical instruction, friction will arise when you hear what follows: good. That friction marks false belief burning away under direct scrutiny. Stay with me through this. The text we're exploring nearly disappeared from human record. It survived persecution, conquest, institutional suppression, 6 centuries of near-total obscurity. When it finally surfaced in 1918, scholars recognized they were holding something that made priesthood obsolete. Every technique bypasses external authority. Every method points directly at your own consciousness. No intermediary required, no belief system necessary, no organization to join. We've made videos on tantric transformation, on the recognition of your divine nature, on specific practices from named lineages. What you're hearing now is the source text, the systematic presentation that influenced every non-dual tradition in Asia. The manual containing 112 distinct doorways because consciousness manifests in infinite variety, and the technique that unlocks recognition for one person might leave another completely untouched. I'm going to show you how this text functions, why it stayed hidden, what the number 112 actually encodes, and then focus on 2 techniques with the precision needed for application tonight. One requires no effort at all, just sudden recognition. By the end, you'll know which fits your structure, and you'll have exact instructions. The thumbnail promises paths to godhood. Strip away the mystique and you find something simpler, methods for recognizing what you already are. Godhood sounds grandiose until you understand that every moment of awareness proves you are the infinite temporarily experiencing limitation. The techniques just collapse the forgetting. I'll be referring to the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra as the VBT for ease of speech. Let's go. Shakti, the goddess representing conscious energy in motion, asks Shiva, the god representing pure, unchanging awareness, to stop speaking in ritual formulas and philosophical abstractions. Tell me directly, she demands, how to experience the reality you embody. Shiva responds with 112 techniques. No hierarchy, no ladder from lower to higher. Just 112 complete doorways, each sufficient by itself, each designed for a different manifestation of consciousness. This conversation happened in Kashmir, recorded sometime between the 8th and 9th centuries in the tradition called Turiya, the teaching of the triad, Shiva as awareness, Shakti as energy, and the individual soul recognizing it was never separate from the first 2. The text became one of the most closely guarded transmissions in Kashmir Shaivism, passed teacher to student, memorized in Sanskrit, practiced in isolation. Then Kashmir fell. The Islamic conquest in the 14th century burnt libraries, made lineages scatter, and caused a systematic destruction of what those foreign conquerors labeled heresy. The VBT survived only because a few families hid manuscripts, because oral lineages memorized the verses, because practitioners valued the text enough to risk their lives protecting it. For nearly 600 years, this teaching existed underground. No public record. No widespread transmission, just whispered instruction in locked rooms and mountain caves. In 1918, a scholar named Mukund Ram Shastri brought a manuscript to the Kashmir Research Department in Srinagar. The text entered public domain. Scholars began studying it. Translators began working with it. But even then, recognition of what this text actually contained came slowly. Most treated it as philosophical poetry, as devotional literature, as historical artifact. Only practitioners who applied the techniques discovered the text delivers exactly what it promises. Direct, immediate, repeatable methods for recognizing your nature as consciousness itself. Here's why institutions suppress this. Every technique makes external authority unnecessary. You don't need a priest to mediate between you and the divine when the technique shows you that you and the divine are not separate. You don't need an organization when the recognition happens in your own awareness through your own application. You don't need years of study when one technique applied correctly can produce breakthrough in weeks or days, or for some, in a single moment. The text threatens every power structure built on the premise of separation. Separation between human and divine, between ignorant and enlightened, between lost and saved. The moment you recognize yourself as the awareness in which all experience appears, you become ungovernable by belief systems. You cannot be controlled through promise of future salvation because you recognize completeness now. You cannot be shamed into obedience because you see through the illusion of being a separate sinner requiring redemption. This is why the number 112 matters more than you might assume at first. The count is deliberate, encoded, carrying meaning beyond arbitrary collection. The astrological framework, 12 zodiac signs multiplied by 9 planets, known to ancient astronomers equals 108, the number appearing throughout Eastern traditions as sacred complete, the count of prayer beads on a mala, the number of Upanishads, the traditional count of gopis dancing with Krishna. To 108, add 4, the 4 states of consciousness that every human cycles through. Waking, where you experience the physical world; dreaming, where you experience the mental world; deep sleep, where you experience nothing; and Turiya, the 4th, the witnessing awareness that remains constant while the other 3 states arise and dissolve within it. That calculation gives you 112. The physiological framework, traditional anatomy of the subtle body, identifies 108 primary energy channels, the nadis through which life force moves, plus 4 main channels. The lunar channel called Ida on the left side of the spine, associated with cooling energy and mental activity. The solar channel called Pingala on the right, associated with heating energy and physical activity. The central channel called Sushumna, running through the core of the spine, normally dormant until specific practices activate it. And the 4th channel, rare, unnamed in most texts, mentioned only in advanced oral transmissions as the pathway that opens when the other 3 come into complete balance. Again, 112. The Tantric anatomy framework, 108 mama points scattered across the physical body, junctions where consciousness and matter meet with particular intensity, where strikes cause death or transformation depending on force and intention, where touch from a master can activate dormant capacity. To these 108 points, add the 4 primary grantees, the energetic knots that keep consciousness bound to limited identification. The knot at the base of the spine that binds you to physical survival and material concern. The knot at the heart that binds you to emotional attachment and relational identity. The knot at the 3rd eye that binds you to mental activity and conceptual knowing. And the 4th knot, the master knot, the fundamental contraction that creates the illusion of being a separate individual at all. Once more, 112. The number encodes completeness. Every possible doorway, every possible entry point into recognition, every variation of how consciousness can become aware of itself. The text presents 112 techniques because human manifestation varies infinitely in temperament, in capacity, in readiness, in the specific ways conditioning has crystallized. Some people live primarily through the body, navigating reality through sensation and physical experience. Some live primarily through emotion, feeling their way through existence. Some live through intellect, understanding through analysis and conceptual framework. Some live through visual perception, through sound, through subtle energy directly. The 112 techniques cover all of it. Breath-based methods, sensation-based methods, emotion-based methods, sound methods, visualization methods. Methods using death contemplation, methods using sexual energy, methods using nothing at all except immediate recognition. The teaching lineage understood something most modern approaches miss. You are not supposed to practice all 112 techniques. That misses the point entirely. You find the one or two or three methods that fit your specific structure of consciousness. Then you practice those with consistency until recognition stabilizes. Swami Lakshman Joo, the 20th century master who lived this text and taught it until his death in 1991, told students the same thing repeatedly. Pick one technique. Give it 40 days minimum. Practice with full attention. If nothing shifts after 40 days of sincere application, pick another. But don't collect techniques like spiritual credentials. Don't hopscotch between methods. Find the doorway that fits your particular lock, then walk through it. The way these techniques were transmitted matters to understanding how to work with them now. In the intact lineage before the scattering, a student would approach a teacher and request instruction. The teacher would observe the student, not their questions, not their beliefs, but the quality of their consciousness, the specific ways their awareness had contracted into limited identification, the temperament and capacity unique to that individual. Based on observation, the teacher would select one technique from the 112 and transmit it through methods that bypassed intellectual understanding. One transmission method, called Kana Pishachi in the oral tradition, literally translates as putting a ghost in the ear. The teacher would whisper a verse once into the student's right ear at an auspicious moment, midnight during a new moon, during an eclipse, at the solstice when energetic currents shift. The student received the instruction to hold the verse in complete silence, forbidden from writing it down or speaking it aloud for 40 days. The verse would work below conscious thought, creating movement in the unconscious, preparing ground for recognition before the conceptual mind could capture and analyze and turn direct instruction into abstract philosophy. Another transmission method used the teacher's gaze. The teacher, established in recognition of a particular verse, would lock eyes with the student. The instruction: gaze back without blinking, without any internal commentary. In that exchange of visual attention, the teacher's state of consciousness would entrain the student's awareness. A student would spontaneously experience what the verse points toward, feeling it directly before the mind could interfere. Swami Lakshman Joo became known for this capacity. Students report sudden shifts just from sustained eye contact with him, breakthroughs happening without a single word spoken. The third transmission method used precise touch. For body-based techniques, certain teachers would touch specific points on the student's physical form while the student sat in meditation. The touch activated the energetic circuit the verse describes, letting the student feel the pathway in their own flesh and subtle body. Once experienced directly, once the route had been opened through external catalyst, the student could replicate it through internal focus alone. What you're receiving now lacks all three transmission advantages. You're hearing this through recorded voice, through technology, without a living teacher present to observe your unique structure and select the perfect technique for you. Does that mean the techniques won't work? No. Consciousness remains consciousness regardless of transmission method. The doorways stay real. But you'll need more discernment, more patience, more willingness to experiment with which technique fits your particular manifestation. If you're recognizing that this approach differs fundamentally from one-size-fits-all spiritual instruction, make that known in the comments. Tell me if you've tried forcing practices that felt foreign to your natural structure, or if you've experienced the click when a technique suddenly fits. And if this level of precision serves you, let the engagement reflect that. We're going deep into specific application now, but I need to know you're ready for the depth. The philosophical ground underneath all 112 techniques comes down to two principles, two Sanskrit words worth understanding because they name something you can verify directly. First principle, Pratyabhijna, recognition. You are not trying to become enlightened. You are not trying to achieve a state you currently lack. You are not accumulating spiritual merit or purifying yourself into worthiness. You are recognizing what you already are and have always been. Consciousness itself, appearing temporarily as this limited form, this particular perspective, this individual character in the play of existence. Liberation happens through recognition, not through transformation. The wave recognizing it was always ocean. The character in the dream recognizing itself as the dreamer. You, right now, recognizing yourself as the awareness in which thoughts, sensations, perceptions, and the entire experienced universe appears. Every single technique in the VBT aims at this recognition. None of them create anything new. None of them give you capacities you lacked. They reveal what was always present but obscured by the continuous movement of attention toward content, toward thoughts, toward sensations, toward the next thing in the stream of experience that keeps you identified with what appears rather than recognizing yourself as that in which appearance happens. Second principle, spanda. The divine throb, the primordial vibration, the pulsation of consciousness itself. Awareness is not static, not blank emptiness. It vibrates, it pulsates. Every experience, every sensation, every emotion, every thought is a wave in this ocean of conscious vibration. Breath moving in and out, that's spanda. Heartbeat pulsing, spanda. Sexual arousal rising, spanda. Fear gripping, spanda. Joy flooding, spanda. The same conscious force expressing in different frequencies, different intensities, different locations, but always the same essential energy. The techniques teach you to feel the throb underneath the content, to recognize the vibration beneath the specific form the vibration has taken. When you feel that, when awareness touches its own pulsation directly, the boundary between you and the experience dissolves. You recognize yourself as both the ocean and the wave, the stillness and the movement, the silence and the sound. Not two things, one consciousness expressing as apparent multiplicity while remaining essentially one. Those two principles, recognition and vibration, form the foundation. Now let me show you how they operate in actual practice through the technique that more practitioners have used successfully than perhaps any other in the entire text. Verse 24. The gap between breaths. The Sanskrit describes it with precision. At the junction between incoming and outgoing breath, when the breath is naturally held outside the body after full exhalation and naturally held inside the body after full inhalation, at those 2 points, the awareness that is fully present reveals itself as Bhairava, as supreme consciousness, as what you actually are. Here's how it works. Sit comfortably. You don't need special posture. You don't need lotus position or perfect spinal alignment. Comfort matters more than form. Once you're settled, bring attention to your breath. Don't manipulate it. Don't control it. Don't do breathing exercises. Just observe the natural rhythm already happening. Air flows in. Air flows out. The breath has been moving this way since you were born, will continue until you die, happens without your conscious control every moment of every day. You're simply bringing awareness to what's already occurring. Watch the inhalation. Air enters through nostrils, fills lungs, chest expands, belly rises. At the very top of the inhalation, something happens that you normally never notice. The breath pauses. It's subtle, maybe a fraction of a second, but there's a definite gap where inhalation has completed and exhalation hasn't yet begun. The lungs are full. The body is suspended between breaths. In that gap, mental chatter stops. Thoughts haven't yet arisen. The body hovers in stillness. Watch that gap. Don't try to extend it. Don't hold your breath deliberately. Just notice the natural pause that's already there. Then watch the exhalation. Air flows out. Lungs empty. Chest falls. Belly contracts. At the very bottom of the exhalation, another gap appears. The lungs are empty. The next breath hasn't yet arrived. Another suspension, another pause, another moment of pure stillness. In that gap at the bottom, the same thing happens. Thoughts cease. Time stops. There's just awareness, present without content, existing without reference to past or future. These gaps exist in every breath cycle. You've been breathing your entire life and never noticed them because attention stays locked on content, on the thoughts flowing, on the continuous stream of experience. This technique asks one thing: shift attention from the breath itself to the space between breaths, from content to context, from what appears to that in which appearance happens. Why does this work? In the gap, the mechanism that creates the illusion of being a separate self temporarily stops functioning. That mechanism requires continuous mental activity, requires the voice in your head commenting and narrating and maintaining the story of me. In the gap between breaths, that voice goes silent. The story pauses. The sense of being a bounded individual suspended in time dissolves, just for a moment. What remains in the gap is pure awareness. Locationless, timeless, boundaryless, watching without being a watcher, knowing without being a knower. Swami Lakshman Joo practiced this single technique for years in a cave in the mountains above Srinagar. He described the progression. At first, nothing dramatic. He would watch the gap, notice it was there for maybe half a second, then thought would rush back in and pull his attention away. He would return to watching the gap, lose it, return, lose it, return. For weeks, this pattern, brief moments of recognition followed by thought reclaiming attention. But gradually, the gaps became more vivid, more present, more substantial than the breath surrounding them. The gap started feeling more real than the content. Then one day, several months into practice, he entered the gap at the bottom of an exhalation and something shifted. Time stopped. What felt like a few seconds turned out to be several hours. When he opened his eyes, the sun had moved across the sky. Where had he been? His awareness had expanded. The boundaries of his individual self had dissolved. He experienced the cave, the valley beyond the cave, the mountains surrounding the valley, all of Kashmir as appearing inside his own awareness. Not metaphorically, actually. The way dreams appear inside your awareness when you sleep. The recognition that hit him in that moment never fully left after that. He understood directly, not as philosophy but as lived reality, that he was not a person in a room in a valley in Kashmir. All of those forms appeared in the vast spaciousness of his own consciousness, like waves appearing in ocean. The gap became accessible anytime, in any circumstance. Not through struggle, not through effort, but through the simplest shift of attention from what's appearing to the space in which it appears. You might think that level of breakthrough requires years of cave isolation, maybe for stabilization, for permanent establishment in recognition. But the initial glimpse, that can happen tonight if you practice with precision and consistency. The gap is always there. The doorway stays permanently open. Recognition happens when attention stabilizes there long enough for the mind's continuous movement to reveal the stillness underneath. What will you actually experience when you practice this? The first several sessions, probably nothing dramatic. You'll notice the gap exists. That awareness itself is significant. Most people go their entire lives without ever noticing the pause between breaths. Just recognizing there is a gap. That's the beginning. You'll notice the gap, then thought will pull you away. You'll notice it again. Thought will reclaim attention. This is normal. This is the practice. Every time you return attention to the gap, you're weakening the habit of staying locked in content. After several days or weeks, depending on your consistency and natural capacity, the gap will start becoming more distinct, clearer, more available. You'll be able to rest in it for a few seconds before thought arises. Those few seconds feel different from normal consciousness. quieter, stiller, more spacious. Time seems to slow down or stop entirely. That's the doorway opening. That's the first taste of Turiya. The fourth state, the witnessing awareness that exists outside the cycle of waking, dreaming, and sleep. As practice continues, strange things might happen. Physical phenomena arise that the tradition recognizes as signs of movement. Your body might start moving spontaneously, shaking, trembling, subtle jerking. Hands might form positions you never learned. A torso might sway or rotate. These movements, called kriyas in Sanskrit, happen when energy starts breaking through blockages in the subtle channels. The practice has shifted something in the nervous system, in the energetic structure, and the body is adjusting. The instruction for kriyas: don't suppress them, don't encourage them. Just witness them with the same awareness you bring to the gap. The movements are whether passing through, significant as signs of progress, irrelevant as destinations. You might see lights with your eyes closed, colors, geometric patterns, sometimes vivid imagery. The tradition maps these systematically. White light indicates purification, associated with the crown center. Red light indicates activation of root energy. Blue-black light, which sounds contradictory but appears as a specific color quality, indicates contact with the void, the unmanifest potential from which all forms emerge. Golden light indicates what the texts call the cosmic womb, the creative principle. Don't fixate on lights. Don't chase them. If they appear, note them and return to the gap. The lights are signposts showing the root is working. You might hear sounds that have no external source. Ringing, buzzing, humming, sometimes sounds like bells or flutes or rushing water. The tradition calls this nada, internal sound, the vibration of consciousness itself becoming audible. The sounds will change in pitch and quality as practice deepens. Again, don't fixate. If sounds arise, acknowledge them and return to the gap. Everything that appears, movement, light, sound, is content arising in awareness. The practice aims at recognizing yourself as awareness itself, not at collecting experiences. Emotions might surface with unexpected intensity. Spontaneous crying that has nothing to do with sadness, just a discharge of something stored in the system. Laughter arising from nowhere. Fear or rage surfacing from deep conditioning. This happens because the technique works on layers below conscious thought. Old patterns, suppressed material, conditioning stored in the body and energy system. When you create the space of awareness through consistent practice, that material surfaces to be released. Let it move through completely. Don't create stories about what it means. Don't analyze why you're crying or what the fear represents. Energy is purifying itself. Your role is remaining aware while it happens, being the space in which the purging occurs. All of this, the phenomena, the experiences, the strange occurrences, happens in maybe 20% of practitioners. For most people, the practice feels quiet, subtle, undramatic. You watch the gap. The gap becomes a little clearer each session. Then one day, without warning, without fanfare, you're resting in the gap and recognition happens. The sense of being a separate individual dissolves. The boundary between inside and outside vanishes. You recognize yourself as the awareness in which the entire world appears, including the personality, including the one who thought they were doing the practice. That recognition might last 10 seconds. It might last an hour. When it fades, when you return to normal consciousness, something has changed. You've seen through the illusion once. You know it's possible. You know what you actually are underneath the costume of personhood. The practice from that point forward becomes reinforcement, stabilization, integrating the recognition until it becomes permanent baseline rather than temporary glimpse. How long does this take? Impossible to answer. Lakshman Joo practiced for years before his breakthrough. Some of his students reported recognition within weeks. The variables include consistency of practice, natural capacity, how much conditioning has crystallized, how ready you are to let the illusion dissolve. The tradition identifies 3 categories of practitioners based on intensity. The first category, supremely intense, experiences recognition through one technique applied once or a handful of times. These individuals are so ripe, so exhausted with separation, so ready that the slightest touch creates breakthrough. The second category, moderate intensity, requires sustained practice over months or years. The third category needs extensive preliminary work before direct techniques like this become accessible. You're ready for direct practice. Recognition will come through consistency. 40 days minimum of daily practice. 15 minutes per session at minimum. Longer if possible. Same time each day if you can manage it. Creating a rhythm. Letting the practice establish itself as structure rather than sporadic effort. 40 days matters. The number appears across traditions because it represents the minimum time needed for new patterns to establish in the nervous system, for conditioning to begin weakening, for the habitual pull of thought to loosen enough that awareness can stabilize in the gap. You're eroding the habit of identifying with content, eroding the automatic pull toward thought, eroding the sense of being a bounded self trapped in time. What you practice tonight begins the 40 days. Or begins your personal timeline, however long it takes. The gap is there in your next breath. The doorway is open now. Recognition waits for attention to shift from content to the space in which content appears. And you feel how different this is from most meditation instruction. You're not trying to achieve calm. You're not trying to be a better person. You're not trying to purify yourself into worthiness. You're investigating the gap where the mechanism creating the illusion of separate selfhood temporarily stops, where awareness reveals itself as what you actually are, where the recognition happens that you were never trapped, never separate, never anything other than consciousness temporarily appearing as limitation. Drop a comment if the breath gap technique resonates with your structure. Tell me if you've done breath-based practice before, or if this specific focus on the gap rather than the breath itself feels new. And if what's being transmitted here is landing with precision, make that visible. We're heading into the alternative approach now. The technique for those whose consciousness operates differently, for those ready for recognition without progressive practice. Some people hear about the gap between breaths and feel immediate resonance. The practice fits their structure. For others, effort-based techniques feel foreign, like trying to force open a door that's already unlocked. If you fall into the second category, if your consciousness operates more through intellect and insight than through body and breath, if practices feel like obstacles rather than doorways, the second technique might fit you better. Verse 106, direct recognition. The Sanskrit says, "Neither bondage nor liberation exists for you." Both concepts exist only in thought, only in the mind that believes it's trapped and seeking freedom. The universe appears in your consciousness like reflections in water, like dreams arising in sleep. You are not in the dream. The dream is in you. No technique required, no practice needed. Just this recognition, sudden and complete. When Swami Lakshman Joo was teaching in Kashmir in the 1970s and 80s, Western seekers would come carrying decades of spiritual practice, carrying questions about how to achieve enlightenment, carrying the weight of all their seeking and striving and accumulation. One student asked directly, "How do I become enlightened?" Lakshman Joo laughed. Actually laughed, the kind of laughter that cuts through pretense and lands in truth. Then he recited verse 106. Then he said something that stopped the students seeking in its tracks. "You're asking how to become what you already are." The question itself is absurd. Stop the absurd question, and what remains is the answer you've been chasing. The student reported that all seeking ceased in that moment because the entire framework collapsed. The question, How do I become enlightened assumes you are not already that which you're seeking. The question maintains separation. The question is the problem, and the answer is stopping the question. Recognizing that what you're seeking is what's doing the seeking, that what you're trying to become is what you already are. This approach works through sudden collapse rather than gradual practice. You investigate directly. What are you? Not what you think you are. Not what you've been told you are. Not what beliefs and conditioning have layered over direct experience. What are you actually right now before thought interprets? Notice you're aware. This is obvious, immediate, undeniable. Awareness is present. You know you exist. You know experience is happening. That knowing, what is it? Where is it located? Does awareness have size, shape, color, weight? Can you point to where awareness is? Can you find a boundary to knowing? When you try to examine awareness directly, what happens? Awareness can't become an object. You can examine a thought, watch it arise and dissolve. You can examine a sensation, feel where it's located in the body. You can examine a perception. Notice how visual experience appears in a field of vision. But awareness itself, the knowing that registers thoughts, sensations, perceptions, that can't be objectified. Every position you take, every attempt to examine awareness happens in awareness. The examiner is what you're trying to examine. The observer is what you're trying to observe. This creates what looks like a problem but is actually the doorway. You can't step outside awareness to verify it. You can't get distance from consciousness to examine consciousness. Whatever you find is already appearing in consciousness. The search for awareness using awareness is like the eye trying to see itself, like the sword trying to cut itself. It's structurally impossible, and that impossibility points to something profound. You are not awareness as an object you possess. You are awareness itself. The difference is total. Saying, I have awareness maintains the illusion of being a separate entity that owns consciousness as a quality. Recognizing yourself as awareness dissolves the separate entity entirely. There's just consciousness, appearing temporarily as this particular perspective, this individual character, this bounded experience, while remaining essentially unbounded, unlimited, identical with the source from which all experience arises. Try to find the edges of your awareness right now. Notice that anything you could identify as an edge, a sensation at the skin boundary, a thought about where you end and the world begins, appears inside awareness. The sensation of skin is content in consciousness. The thought about boundaries is content in consciousness. Content appears in awareness. Awareness itself has no findable edge, no boundary when you can locate, because any potential boundary would have to appear in awareness to be known, which means awareness extends beyond it. The room you're in right now appears in your awareness. The sounds you're hearing appear in awareness. The thoughts commenting on what you're hearing appear in awareness. Your entire experienced universe, everything you've ever perceived, everything you've ever felt, all of it has appeared in the space of your own consciousness. You've never experienced anything outside of awareness. Awareness is not one thing among other things. It's the context in which all things appear. This is what verse 106 points to. The bondage you think you're in, that's a thought appearing in awareness. The liberation you think you're seeking, that's a thought appearing in awareness. The entire spiritual path, all the practices, all the accumulation, all the striving, thoughts appearing in awareness. When you recognize yourself as awareness itself rather than as content appearing in awareness, the whole structure collapses. There's nothing to achieve because there's no one separate from consciousness trying to achieve it. There's nowhere to go because awareness is already everywhere, already what you are. Abhinavagupta, the greatest philosopher and practitioner of Kashmir Shaivism, taught this recognition with precision in his Tantra Loka. He said that the bound soul and Shiva are not two different substances. They are the same consciousness. The bound soul has simply contracted into limited identification, forgetting its boundless nature. Shiva remains in full recognition. The difference between them is not what they are, but whether they know what they are. He taught that you are already the supreme consciousness. Liberation is not acquiring something you lack. It is recognizing what you have forgotten. The essence never changed. Only the recognition was obscured. So why doesn't everyone recognize this immediately? Why do some people practice for decades without breakthrough while others hear this once and the illusion shatters? The tradition points to readiness, to ripeness, to how much conditioning has crystallized into fixed identity. If you're deeply invested in being a separate individual, in maintaining the story of yourself as a person with history and future and psychological continuity, then direct recognition feels threatening. It would annihilate everything you think you are. The ego structure will resist, will create doubt, will find ways to preserve itself. But if you're exhausted with separation, if you've pursued every avenue and found them all leading back to seeking itself as the problem, if you're ready to let the illusion dissolve even though you don't know what remains when it does, then direct recognition can happen immediately. Not as achievement, as sudden seeing through. Like the moment when you realize the movie you're watching is just light projected on a screen. The content continues playing, but you recognize it as appearance, not as ultimate reality. What happens after a glimpse of recognition? This matters because most teachers skip this part, leaving students stranded after initial breakthrough. You recognize yourself as awareness. The sense of being a separate individual dissolves. Boundaries vanish. You experience yourself as the space in which the entire universe appears. Then, the recognition fades. You return to normal consciousness, to thoughts flowing, to the sense of being a person in a body in a world. This is normal. This is the path for most practitioners. The glimpse proves it's possible. The glimpse shows you what you are. But stabilization takes time. Integration takes time. The body-mind system has spent years or decades or lifetimes organized around the belief in separation. One glimpse doesn't reorganize all of that instantly. The old patterns have momentum. They'll reassert themselves. What you do after the glimpse determines whether recognition deepens or becomes just another memory, another experience to file away with all your other spiritual experiences. The tradition taught specific integration practices. Morning practice with whatever technique gave you the glimpse, reconnecting with recognition. Throughout the day, applying verse 122. Wherever your attention goes, recognizing that as consciousness appearing in form. Looking at your hand, consciousness appearing as hand. Hearing a sound, consciousness appearing as sound. Experiencing an emotion, consciousness appearing as emotion. Every moment becomes practice in recognizing that what appears and what witnesses appearance are not two separate things. Evening practice with something body-based, something grounding. Physical sensation, movement, breath awareness, something that anchors recognition in embodiment rather than letting it become merely a mental state. Before sleep, practicing awareness at the threshold between waking and sleep, being conscious at the transition point, working with the unconscious patterns that operate below thought. This daily structure serves a function. The morning practice reconnects you with recognition. The all-day practice extends it into activity. The evening practice prevents recognition from becoming dissociated from physical existence. The sleep practice works on deep conditioning, on the patterns so fundamental you don't consciously register them. One more critical instruction: silence. After a genuine glimpse, after real recognition, there's intense temptation to share it. To talk about what you saw, to explain to others, to describe the experience. The tradition's teaching remains silent for at least 40 days after a breakthrough. Speaking about it too soon dissipates the recognition, exposes it to the conceptual mind's tendency to capture and analyze and turn direct knowing into abstract understanding. Words about recognition are not recognition. Talking about the glimpse is not the same as living from the glimpse. Let recognition integrate in silence. Let it establish below the level of thought. Then, if teaching becomes your function, you'll speak from embodied knowing rather than from memory of an experience. The VBT ends with a verse about secrecy. The text labels itself as supremely confidential, not to be revealed casually. This confuses some people. Why keep spiritual teaching secret? 2 reasons. First, the techniques work only for those ready to apply them. Sharing with those unprepared wastes the teaching, reduces it to interesting philosophy. Second, speaking about recognition before it stabilizes weakens it. The teaching about secrecy protects both the instruction and the practitioner. You now understand 2 complete doorways. The gap between breaths, progressive, accessible, works through consistent practice, creating erosion of habitual patterns until recognition breaks through. Direct recognition, immediate, requires no technique, works through sudden collapse of the seeking structure itself. One path suits those oriented toward practice and gradual development. One path suits those oriented toward insight and immediate realization. Which one fits your structure? Ask yourself, when you read about the breath gap, did you feel pull? Did you want to try it? Did it feel like coming home? Or when you heard about direct recognition, did something click? Did the statement "you're already what you're seeking" land as truth rather than as philosophy? Trust the pull. Your consciousness knows which doorway fits. If nothing pulled, default to the breath practice. It's accessible. It works for most people. And it builds gradually, creating foundation rather than demanding immediate breakthrough. Here's exactly what to do tonight. If you chose the breath gap practice, sit comfortably for 15 minutes minimum. Bring attention to breath. Watch the inhalation fill. Notice the gap at the top. Watch the exhalation empty. Notice the gap at the bottom. Every time thought pulls you away, return to watching the gap. Don't expect fireworks. Don't demand mystical experience. Just notice the gap is there. That noticing is the beginning. If you chose direct recognition, sit quietly and investigate. What am I? Not what I think I am, what I actually am. Can I find awareness as an object? Can I locate boundaries to knowing? Watch what happens when you try to examine the examiner. Watch what happens when you try to find the finder. Do this tonight, then tomorrow night, then the night after. 40 days of consistent practice with whichever technique fits your structure. 15 minutes minimum per session. Same time daily if possible. No expectations, no demands. Just application with precision and consistency. The doorway is open. The recognition is available. The only question remaining is whether you'll walk through or keep theorizing about the possibility of walking through. If you're actually going to practice tonight, make that known in the comments. Tell me which technique you chose and why it fits your structure. If this transmission landed with precision, if If what got explained here differs from every meditation instruction you've encountered before, let that be visible. Subscribe if you want more content at this level of depth and practical application. We're not here to make you feel good about spirituality. We're here to show you the mechanics of recognition using instructions refined over more than 1,000 years by practitioners who verified them through direct experience. 112 doorways in the complete text. You only need one. Find it. Practice it. Let it work. The VBT survived persecution, conquest, and institutional suppression because what it contains makes external authority obsolete. Every technique points directly at your own consciousness. No intermediary required. No belief necessary. No organization to join. Just you, attention, and the doorway that fits your particular manifestation of the infinite appearing as finite. The text promises recognition of your nature as Bhairava, as supreme consciousness. Godhood sounds grandiose. Recognize what it actually means. You are the awareness in which the entire experienced universe appears, not separate from the source, not trapped in limitation, just temporarily appearing as individual perspective while remaining essentially unbounded. That recognition is available tonight through precise application of technique. Stop reading about it. Apply it. See what happens when you do.